So for introductions, my name is Trinity Long. I am the summer intern at the National Farm Worker Ministry. I will be introducing today's presenters. So for our Farm Workers and Immigration webinar, we will have presenters from Migrant Justice. We have Marita Canedo and Madeline Sherrow. Migrant Justice builds the voice, capacity, and power of the farm worker community and engages community partners to organize for economic justice and human rights. They are also the creators of Milk with Dignity. From the National Farm Worker Ministry, we have Rose Green Flores and Julie Taylor. NFWM educates, equips, and mobilizes people of faith and conscience to support farm worker-led campaigns. So at the end of the webinar, we will have a time for questions and answers. However, we welcome you to go ahead and put any questions you might have in the Q&A section, which can be found at the bottom of your screen. And this can happen as your questions come along or at the end. Whatever questions we are unable to answer in our time constraints or maybe need some time to follow up will be answered in a follow-up email along with the recording. So first off, we're going to get started with our presenters from NFWM.
Thank you so much, Trinity, and welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to start by giving just a very quick overview of who farm workers are in the United States right now. There are more than 2 million farm workers who work in fields, orchards, nurseries, dairies, and more across the U.S. At least 70% are foreign-born, but depending on geographic area, that number is much higher. And according to government data, around 40% are undocumented. Once again, that number increases based off geographic area. However, I do want to say that most farm worker advocates believe that nationally, that number is higher than 40% of undocumented farm workers. According to the latest agricultural workers survey from 2019 to 2020, on average, the foreign-born farm workers who were interviewed for that survey came to the US 21 years before being interviewed, which means most farm workers living and working in the US right now have been here for years and decades. Next slide. Sadly, the US agricultural system has a long history of relying on forced labor as well as immigrant labor. For this webinar, we won't go too much into that forced labor piece, but I do recommend that you check out NFWM's resources that we put out last year about racism and farm workers if you want to learn more about that part. I'm also going to give just a very brief look at the impact of immigration on farm worker policy. So if you do want to explore this topic more, we have an agricultural worker timeline at nfwm.org. The picture on this slide is a hybrid of that forced labor and immigrant labor, as it is Japanese internment camp workers on a farm, and I'm not sure the specific location for this picture. Next slide. Due to various push and pull factors, many Chinese people started to immigrate to the US, mostly through California in the late 1840s and then continued on. They worked in agriculture as well as other industries, and there was a need for workers in agriculture. With Chinese workers, also many other Asian workers came and were working in agriculture. By around 1880, it's guesstimated that in California, 7 out of every 8 farm workers were of Asian descent. With this increased immigration of Chinese people also led to an increase in racial tension. And there was a big anti-Chinese sentiment, which led to an anti-Chinese movement cultivating in the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, which stopped immigration from China. And it also did not allow those who had already immigrated here to become US citizens until World War II, when we needed China as an ally. And after this, there was additional policies that stopped Asian immigration, as well as other immigration from countries and places we deemed undesirable, which was the Immigration Act of 1924, which prohibited, as I said, people from those undesirable locations. And you can see in this graphic, I know it's kind of small, but this newspaper clipping talks about preserving the racial type as it exists here today. So even though this article is 100 years old, there was very much this rhetoric of immigrants are bringing disease, they're bad for the country, they're taking jobs. That very much existed. And if you want to explore that topic, there's a lot of unfortunate newspaper clippings that you could look to read more. But a little before this was passed in 1924, World War I, once again, we had a big need for agricultural workers because, people were going off to war. We had lower immigration from Europe. So we partnered with Mexico to have more Mexican workers come in. And then, not quite yet, sorry. Not quite yet, Julie. So we brought in Mexican workers during World War I, and then the Great Depression hits in 1929. And under President Hoover, we have a big mass deportation. Some historians say it was over 1 million, some say not quite that much, but around half of those of Mexican descent that were deported were US citizens. A sad example of this is the Los Angeles Welfare Department, partnered with hospitals and would deport people of Mexican descent when they went into hospitals. And bear in mind, as I said, many were US citizens, or they, were deported to somewhere in Mexico that they had absolutely no ties to whatsoever. The reasoning for those mass deportations is because people of Mexican descent were taking resources and jobs away from white Americans. Next slide. Shortly after the Great Depression, we have World War II. Once again, there's a labor shortage and a big demand for agricultural workers. 1942, that was the start of the Bracero program, which was Mexican workers. It was a collaboration between Mexico and the United States. There were protocols to supposedly stop discrimination and prevent low wages, but the Bracero program was rampant with exploitation, and many have called it a form of slavery. You can see in this ad here is one ad that somebody posted after, I guess, the fact, because it says that they've placed an order for 6,000 workers in the state of Washington. This top picture is braceros as they were coming into the United States. They were thought of as dirty, so they are being sprayed with insecticides so that they could be clean before coming here to work in the US. Simultaneously, while the Bracero program is going on, so there's this need for agricultural workers, you also have another mass deportation under Eisenhower in 1954, because yes, there was a need for workers, but you also had a group of people saying there's too many people here, whether they're documented or undocumented, of Mexican descent. So another perhaps 1 million, that number is also debated, of people of Mexican descent were deported. And similar to the deportations in the 1930s, there people that had US citizens were also people who were US citizens were also deported. So hopefully what you're hearing with this quick brief synopsis is we continue to have this need for workers who are foreign born, and then we also have these continued policies that treat immigrant laborers as they are disposable commodities, and we have these dehumanizing tactics. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to let Julie Taylor give the next part of the presentation.
Rose, thanks for that good background. So undocumented farm workers today are forced to leave their countries, coming to the United States, looking for a livelihood that they cannot attain in their own country. Many times the reasons for their migration are directly related to U.S. policies. For example, in 1954, U.S. and Guatemalan elites led a military coup against democratically elected President Jacobo Arbenz, which resulted in decades-long state repression, displacement, and poverty. Similarly, another example is in 1994. NAFTA was established, and under NAFTA, the U.S. sent a flood of subsidized corn to Mexico, causing the price to drop there. Unable to compete with subsidized imports, over 2 million small farmers in Mexico lost their livelihoods. And given that farming was their expertise, they were forced to come to the U.S. to labor in our fields. There are connections between U.S. policy and the migration of people to the U.S. Many undocumented farm workers experience low wages, but no benefits. They have hazardous work, but no health care, and very little access to even clinic services in many parts of the country. No driver's license, access to affordable higher education, and other opportunities that many U.S. workers are able to share. At work, undocumented status makes workers especially vulnerable to abuse, as some employers and supervisors constantly hold the deportation card. Sometimes employers literally hold legitimate documents for their workers, making them vulnerable to being stopped without them or threatening to destroy or not return them. There's widespread criminalization of immigrants throughout the U.S. Political rhetoric pervades U.S. campaigning, especially right now, suggesting that immigrants steal our jobs or are invading our country or are perpetrating crimes on a large scale. Nothing could be farther from the truth, and I hope you'll take advantage of the resources that we have at us to discuss this. Family separation, constant fear, and cultural isolation lead many undocumented immigrants to experience poor mental health. They have some of the highest rates of depression, anxiety, and fear. Not just the pressures that come from living in poverty, but also the real life experience of being afraid of what can happen to them. Rose?
Yeah, so as we mentioned, this is a pretty brief overview of the impact of immigration on farm workers. We encourage you to watch the short film that we made in collaboration with Migrant Justice and La Unión del Pueblo Entero in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. In this video, there are 6 farm workers who share their stories, their experiences living and working in the U.S. as an immigrant. Please watch that and listen to them and uplift their voices. We also have additional resources about immigration. We have Mythbusters. We have a lesson plan that you can go through on your own or with a community of friends. So please visit nfwm.org/immigration for all of these resources. And we also have our petition asking Congress to create comprehensive immigration reform that is fair and humane. Julie, I believe, will talk about that a little bit more when we have our take action slide later. But right now, write down, go visit nfwm.org/immigration so you can do that after the video, after this webinar. With that, I'm going to invite Migrant Justice to go ahead and present on their slides.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marita Canedo. I'm originally from La Paz, Bolivia. I don't know if you want to go to the next slide. Thank you. So yeah, thank you for inviting us to this webinar. We are really glad to have the space and opportunity to share with you about who we are and what are we doing. And yeah, we just want to acknowledge that having you here learning from us and also supporting our work, it's really important just to connect how many people we are related on this, right? It's not the workers and allies or immigrants and citizens, is all together really in solidarity for a better world. And here's my coworker and teammate.
Hi, my name is Madeline. Marita's gonna present the first part of what we have to share, and then I'll jump in towards the end.
Yeah, so you wanna go to the next slide? So who is Migrant Justice? What do? We are a grassroots organization led by immigrant dairy farm workers. All the work that we do is with the framework of human rights and economic justice. Our main mission is to build the voice, capacity, and power of our community, involving allies as yourself to keep on going for human rights and economic justice. I don't know if anybody here already had heard about migrant justice. You can just put an emoji or give me a thumbs up or raise your hand. Yeah, we are based in Vermont, and we do many things, but mostly focus on dairy farm workers. And if you want to go to the next slide, please. I just want to share a little bit about the context of the dairy industry in Vermont. So Vermont is not one of the biggest dairy states in the country. However, dairy is a big industry for the state. And we know that immigrants are the ones sustaining this industry, not only in Vermont, but in the Northeast region and around the country. The people that we work with, we know that 85% to 90% of the migrants in Vermont are family members and not family members of the farm owners, but they come together as a family unit. And a lot of people are from South Mexico and Guatemala. Dairy, it's an all year round work. So that means that people are not with crops, like following the crop and working through seasons is something that needs to be done all year round. And people get housing. So many times farm owners provide housing. And it's interesting dynamic because people live where they work and they work where they live, which also opens to have an employee 24/7. Most of the farms are small farms. It's a rural state, so everybody's very isolated, and it makes our community more invisible. The farms have an average of 5 workers, having the smallest one with 1 worker and the biggest with 15. And because of being a rural state, you can have a cousin, a sibling, a parent working in a farm 5 miles away, but possibly you're not going to see that person in many, many months. A lot of the people in the dairy industry are undocumented immigrants, which leads to an additional exploitation, bringing fear about calling immigration, because Vermont is a border state. So we have also border patrol around the state. And that's why we do a lot of worker rights, worker and housing rights, but we have to focus on immigrant rights as well. So we take a lot of things on immigration cases. Next slide. And because we are a border state, is that how we face border patrol, or sometimes people hired by them to monitor people that are immigrants in the state. And Vermont is known as a white state, and I will call it a white state of mind, because there's this invisibility of our community. There are a lot of people of color, there are a lot of immigrants here. And unfortunately, because of this set of mind, we see a lot of discrimination, detentions happening in the roads. Some detentions ended up in deportation, separation of families. And many, many times we have seen a collaboration between immigration enforcement and law enforcement, Vermont law enforcement. But the community had decided to resist and to fight these cases. And you can see in the photo, on the picture, the case of Jose Luis. He was detained by Border Patrol after a dentist appointment. Somebody called on him and his driver, and the driver was a citizen, but didn't look as an immigrant, the driver, and Border Patrol just profiled them and stopped them and arrest Jose Luis for a few months. He fought his case, and for years he was facing deportation procedures. He was released under bond. And just this year in January, he was able to close his case because he could show that he wasn't a priority for deportation. He was fighting his case, showing that he was only going to the doctor and that he's one of the people that is leading the community, and also was just going to a dentist appointment. So that's how our membership keeps organizing, mobilizing the public. We put a lot of pressure on the immigration judges for release people that are detained, like Jose Luis. And for years, immigration enforcement was focused on migrant justice as an organization. The organization was surveillance, leaders were detained, there were threats. They even went to the point to bring secret informants to our meetings to just tell them what we were doing, how we were organizing. But that made our community stronger because we decided to speak up and protect our rights. And we sued the Department of Homeland Security and ICE, and they should stop, and they have stopped. And we ended up in a settlement to targeting leaders and people that are organizing in the community and really making the community be better. Another thing that we have done around immigration rights is stopping the collaboration between police and immigration enforcement, included the DMV, because we have driver license regardless of your immigration status. The DMV cannot share information with ICE. There were cases that people were going to get the driver license and they were encountered with ICE officers that were called by DMV staff. And same with the police. Somebody will get stop traffic, and even if they weren't driving, they were a passenger, police was calling immigration enforcement with the excuse to have an interpreter or because they felt threatened. So we were able to pass a bill that it's called No Más Polimigra, or the Fair and Impartial Policing, that says that police cannot collaborate with immigration enforcement. And as a law, every year we have to make sure that it's monitored, it's interpreted as it should from every agency in the state. And it's been a big success. This year also, we were able to enforce this law to make it stronger, but it's still work to do. One thing that also we're doing on this is working really strong with our community to strengthen this FIPP law, educating people. We really are focused on educating not only our community members, but allies and people in different towns, so they know exactly what's going on and they can also support and be in solidarity when asking their towns to be supportive of this law. Can we go to the next slide? One thing that we also have done is, as I said, we work in a lot of worker and housing rights. And we know, and we have learned with the pandemic that these workers are essential workers. There was a memorandum from Department of Homeland Security asking the Department of Labor to provide a letter of recommendation for prosecutorial discretion, which means that if someone is in a labor dispute with an employer, the Department of Labor can ask for that person to not get into immigration enforcement and not start a deportation case. It's really important to have this collaboration with the Department of Labor. So far, part of the work that we have done around this is to educate the Department of Labor, because as many laws or many resolutions or memorandums that the government can put out there, they are not taking the time and focus on educating the agencies. So it was really important for us to approach the Department of Labor, show them this memorandum, telling them that this is an opportunity for them to collaborate with immigrants that are bringing cases, and the response of the Department of Labor has to be really bringing justice when employers are exploiting their employees. So that's something that is in the works. We're still in conversations with the Department of Labor, and hopefully they will have better materials and understanding and be more accessible to the public. So I'm gonna stop there with all the information I gave, and please feel free to put questions on the chat or take notes and we can answer later. I'm gonna pass it to Madeline now, and she's gonna talk more about the other part of the work that we do.
Thank you. Can you go to the next slide, please? So because of the lack of labor protections for agricultural workers, and also the low capacity that we've seen in enforcing the protections that do actually cover migrant workers, and also because of what Marita was talking about, all the extra vulnerability that migrant workers face because of immigration status, farm workers have worked really hard to also make creative solutions to protecting their rights. And farm workers in Vermont, for migrant justice, learned from farm workers in Florida, in the coalition of Immokalee workers, about a model for creating change that's called worker-driven social responsibility, or WSR. And this model recognizes that it's the big companies and the big corporations at the top of the food system who really have the power and the money to create the kind of wide-reaching change that is needed in the food system and in supply chains. And when farm workers from Vermont learned about this model, they realized that migrant workers and farm owners here actually share a lot of the same interests in making changes in the dairy industry. And so that's when what you heard mentioned briefly, Milk with Dignity. Milk with Dignity was the program that was created to call on large dairy buying companies in the Northeast region to be responsible for the rights and protections of the workers that are working on the farms, milking the cows, whose milk then goes to be on the shelves and sold under the brands of big companies. So this photo that we're seeing right now on the screen, Ben and Jerry's, the famous ice cream company, was the first company to join Milk with Dignity back in 2017. And that came after years of public pressure calling on Ben and Jerry's to, led by farm workers, public pressure calling on them to join this program and protect worker rights. This was a really incredible historic moment. I hope that you can see on the faces of the leaders of the community who made this great victory, that this was really a historic day, a historic moment, and has led to incredible changes within Ben and Jerry's Northeast supply chain. So improvements in housing, people getting raises, paid sick days, paid vacation days, paid vacation days for people, for workers who sometimes didn't even have a day off during the week, let alone vacation, let alone paid vacation. Like, this really represents incredible changes, all the way to protections against discrimination, harassment, retaliation, and more. And farm owners within the program are receiving a premium, extra money coming from the participating company to fund these changes, which is a really important part of how the program works. Next slide, please. So after seeing the huge improvements in conditions on farms within Ben and Jerry's supply chain, the question for the farm worker community then has been how to expand this program to cover more farms and more farm workers. And after a lot of analysis, looking at the industry in the region, farm workers landed on the company Hannaford, which I know there are folks on this call from all over the country. So some of you may be familiar with Hannaford, others no. But it is a supermarket chain with almost 200 stores all the way, it's based in Maine, has stores all the way across the Northeast, over to upstate New York, down to Massachusetts. They buy a lot of milk from the region, and they sell milk under the store brand. So under the Hannaford store brand. So they have this incredible opportunity, not only to expand Milk with Dignity in the state of Vermont, but all across the whole region. Next slide, please. So it was more than 4 years ago now that farm workers initiated contact with Hannaford, tried to start a dialogue, communicate with the president of the company. And after receiving no response, decided to launch a public pressure campaign, similar to the campaign with Ben and Jerry's, calling on Hannaford to join this program, Milk with Dignity. And so over the last 4+ years, there's been a lot of different ways that farm workers have pressured the company, from direct, like, worker-led actions. You see farm workers in the street doing big rallies, marches, speaking tours, pickets, working with consumers and allies to build pressure, working with institutions and other organizations to stand in solidarity, even going as far as working with shareholders who actually own stock in the big mega company, Ahold Delhaize, that actually owns Hannaford. Next slide, please. And Hannaford's response throughout the campaign in the beginning was really not to take it seriously, really just to, Hannaford tried to ignore this campaign. Then as farm workers started to build momentum, build support, we started to see Hannaford announcing like big charitable donations, right after actions trying to save face and make their brand look good. Then as we got farther into the campaign, we've seen Hannaford actually starting to replicate parts of the messaging, parts and pieces of the Milk with Dignity program, and try and sell like a false version to consumers and say that, you know, there's no problem here. We also care about farm worker rights, and that's why we have, for example, what you're seeing on the screen right now is Hannaford announced this workers' rights hotline. But unfortunately, these solutions are not coming from farm workers, and they've really proven to be false solutions. And so Migrant Justice is continuing to build the Milk with Dignity campaign, focusing on Hannaford. And that's really the big main focus of the organization right now, is continuing to build support and momentum and scale for the Milk with Dignity campaign. So I'm gonna stop there. We're excited to share some ideas for ways to support and take action, but I'm gonna pass it back to the National Farm Worker Ministry to take us there.
So thanks, Marita and Madeline, for telling us more about migrant justice and Milk with Dignity. We're really grateful to be partners with you. So yeah, we wanted to take a few minutes to talk about ways that you could take action. And so we're gonna, both of us have some things to suggest, but basically what we've listed out here is immigration reform, farm worker focused legislation, farm worker campaigns, and food certification programs as sort of 4 primary ways to take action. And more about these are included on our website. If you go there and drop down the take action thing. We're currently supporting a boycott of Wendy's with the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, and would invite all of you to help us deliver store manager letters to Wendy's around the country, and then register those deliveries on our website, where we have a map to keep up with where all of these letters go. We hope at some point to be able to say to Wendy's, hey, every Wendy's in the country has gotten a letter. People are paying attention. Please sign onto the Fair Food Program with the coalition. And then we encourage people to shop certified, to support programs like Milk with Dignity, and there's some others that are listed on our website, programs that benefit farm workers and that farm workers have some portion of the leadership of those. For farm worker unions, the union labels and things like that. But all of that is also on our website. And we invite you to take legislative actions. We have a list of bills that support farm worker concerns, things like heat stress, fair pay, limiting pesticide use, protecting farm workers from pesticide exposure. Rose mentioned that in our efforts this year around immigration, we have a petition that we like for everybody to sign that we want to use to give to legislators and to support different efforts. There's lots of ideas about how to work on immigration. There's lots of different opinions, and we continue to find that we're having to sort of dissect some of those a little bit. For example, we're supportive of migrant justice in really not wanting the H-2A program to expand to year round for the dairy program, because the workers are needed year round. We quite frankly don't understand why citizenship isn't given for dairy workers that do that, and why you would give a temporary seasonal document to somebody when you really need them consistently, and they should benefit from the protections that U.S. citizens have as well. We also address issues of child labor. So there are specific bills that are listed on there. I wish I could say they move through Congress with great speed. That's not true. Trying to reach bipartisan support for a lot of these pieces of legislation is difficult, and in recent years, we have also, because of the lack of movement on the federal level, have tried to support state efforts to make changes locally, some with success and some not. But we try to keep up with that portion of our website, and would invite you to be part of our e-news link and to return to the website to see what we're working on as those things emerge. Because lately, lots of things have been coming up, and so it's taking us a bit of time to sort through them and see, do they really benefit all farm workers? Are they just one perspective? have there been too many compromises to reach bipartisan support and that kind of thing? And so, Migrant Justice, you want to talk about some of your action steps as well?
Yes, thank you. And also just, I mean, getting involved with the National Farm Worker Ministry is a great way. Also, I hope that everyone who's on here is part of your network and signs up if you're not. Even this photo that we're seeing on the screen is when the National Farm Worker Ministry came to join farm workers in Vermont at a faith-based rally calling on Hannaford to join the Milk with Dignity program. So one specific action step that we wanted to share, something that hopefully you can do today, perhaps right now, if you have a phone on you or access to the internet, is something that we've been doing, farm workers and allies alike, using Hannaford's public social media platforms as a place to build support for Milk with Dignity. And so Hannaford is very active both on Facebook and on Instagram. So the way that this works is you can just open up Instagram, open up Facebook, search for Hannaford, and you'll see there that they have a lot of posts, recipes, announcements, all kinds of stuff. That's where you can add a comment and say something supporting Milk with Dignity. It can be as simple as hashtag Milk with Dignity. You can talk about why farm worker rights are important to you. You'll see on there that there are thousands, I think, at this point, of comments like this in English and Spanish. There's beautiful photos. You can snap a selfie and add yours to the collection. And this is the kind of thing that the more it happens, the more effective it is. So please do this yourself. Share it with your friends, share it with your family, your coworkers, other students if you're a student. And please take the time to do it, you know, once it could be part of your like morning routine. You're like scrolling through Instagram. Take like 30 seconds to add a post to support farm worker rights.
Can I add something?
Please.
Yeah, thank you, Madeleine. I think supporting the Hannaford campaign is a direct way to support migrant justice. I just want to add that in the last year, we had seen a change in immigration. There are a lot of families coming, more women, more kids in the state of Vermont. And part of it is because the community know that they have protections and rights here because of the fight of the community, and they feel that Vermont is kind of a safe state. However, we know that with the immigration changes, maybe coming with a new election and all this, it's really important to understand that a lot of the people that had come are asylum seekers. And there is a lot of business going on the immigration paperwork and how to provide people with asylum case. And they are also in deportation procedure. All the process of somebody that comes to the border and says that I'm an asylum seeker requires a lot of capacity and hands-on to get their stories, fill out forms, and all that. So wherever you are, it's really important to educate yourself about how to support people that are an asylum seeker. Check nearby if there are legal clinics or something that need hands to help people filling out forms and stories. I know that here at Migrant Justice, we need more hands, and we are collaborating with attorneys, immigration attorneys to do this, but still there is more and more need for people to help us with this. And one thing that I'm seeing in the chat that is really important, thank you, Caswell, is the farm worker housing. Because of more and more immigration housing, it's a crisis. And as Milk with Dignity addresses this issue, so far it's just 20% of the state dairy farms that are addressing this issue, not taking into account the rest of 80% of dairy, but also all the other immigrants that are not in the dairy industry. So housing is a big problem that we need to address in a way to make it more accessible. And one thing that we have done in the legislation that unfortunately wasn't taken, and we're going to fight for it next year, is to make possible that people can rent houses regardless of their immigration status, not being asked for a social security number, and all because people are new here, they don't even have a credit score. So, you know, even that people get a job and can pay for rent, it's very difficult for them to find housing. And also rents are not regulated. Every town can charge as whatever they want or how many deposits they want. So it's really important to also understand and work around towns and educate people about their tenant rights and everything about housing. So yeah, there are a lot of work to do. And I think, yeah, get involved in your local town, check who are doing the work, talk to us. We have ideas. We had done things that work in the past and keep using as tools. But it's really important also to understand that, yes, this is a big problem in Vermont, but it's happening everywhere too.
Yeah, let me just add, and thank you for mentioning housing too. We're focused on immigration reform this year. We'll continue to focus on it next year, but our resources next year are around housing because it's such an issue where you are in Florida, in California, all around the country. So thanks for mentioning that. And I hope the folks that are on today will stay tuned for information about that in the future. So I think we just have a little bit of time for questions.
The only question thus far in the Q&A was just the link for getting the material for the Wendy's boycott. So I've shared that. But to reiterate what Julie said, all of National Farm Workers Take Actions are on our website. If you go to nfwm.org, you'll see where Take Action, and you'll see those farm worker campaigns that you can support. And hopefully somebody maybe wants to drop a question in the chat or the QA section right now while we have a little bit of time. But I did want to mention something that is in the short film that I encouraged you all to watch, is that there has not been any comprehensive immigration reform since 1986. So we really encourage you to look at the petition, look and see what farm worker communities are asking for, sign it, and please share it, because we hope to, like we have on there, we hope to give it to 2 different, I'm drawing a blank on the word now, committees, but we need lots of names on there for it to have impact. So yes, sign it, share it. We'll share it online, share it with all your friends, family, network, because farm workers cannot keep waiting for immigration reform.
Well, let me just invite Migrant Justice to share a little bit, because you have a lot of local mobilizations. And so a lot of the folks I think that are on this call, we know they're actually from Texas. But when you have your call-in days, aren't there ways to participate? I mean, you just shared with us about using social media, but maybe say a word or two about opportunities that people that are not necessarily in Vermont, or of course, if they have relatives or friends that are in Vermont, or they want to vacation in Vermont around a mobilization period, you would love to have them show up in person. But otherwise, what are some other ways that we can be involved with that program?
Thank you, Julie. So as you said, we have calling days to the president of Hannaford Supermarkets, and we publicize that. So if you want to get those emails and those notifications, I invite you to sign in in our website. It's Get Involved. And then you can put what are your abilities, what you want to do. But calling days, you can call from anywhere in the country to President Mike Bell and ask them to listen to farm workers and join Mill with Dignity.
Yeah, we do have one question I see now, but I want to say with those call-ins, they really only are like 2 minutes, and I'm someone who does not like making phone calls, but it's pretty easy. So if I can do it, who has phone anxiety, then I very much encourage. And I'm in Missouri, so I'm not on the Northeast, but it's a great way to participate. The question is, what is your thinking on the new policy from President Biden? And it's not specified, but I'm inferring the new policy regarding the border.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame, I think, that, there are these trades of closing more and more the borders, because the reality is that they are not closed. They are more controlled and creating more violence to the people crossing the borders. If they really want to shut the borders, they will do it. If they really want to deport everyone, they will do it. It's just a way to put people in fear. And again, it's all business. Having people that charge many, many, many dollars from being here and staying here and being safe. It's just a shame. You want to add something?
No, I think that's perfect.
Yeah, it's discouraging at this point that, I mean, I will say I have been grateful for the efforts to try to expedite some of the paperwork and processes like that. It's just not far enough. We ended up with a difficult situation there as a backup from participation and non sort of proactive work. And then, so now, at different junctures, then we just want to do this quick clamp down so that we can sort of meet political cries. But it's discouraging. Yeah, there are better ways to do this. There are some pieces of legislation that are calling for allowing asylum seekers to get workers permits much quicker than before while they wait for the opportunity to be processed. And there's some other like things like that, but they're not passed. They're introduced, but not passed. And so they seem to be coming at all different kinds. And then there's some that are pretty regressive about what you would have to do to earn citizenship if you were in process, and they're not adequate at this point. So, but you really have to keep watching the legislation and what gets inserted into it and where some pieces of immigration reform are being inserted into other bills. Yeah.
There are no other questions, so my final comments from panelists. For me, I would just very much encourage, we've listed out our social media, Migrant Justice's social media. That is the best way to stay up to date on campaigns, on those action items. Things change constantly, so please follow us. If you're not already, follow both us and Migrant Justice, and please encourage your networks to follow us as well. That's the way for to make change is if we really do come together and stand in solidarity and all of us take part in these actions.
Yeah, I concur. And I think, of course, National Farm Worker Ministries work is with Migrant Justice, but it's also with other farm worker organizing groups around the country who are doing their part in their place, with different circumstances. We find that we keep learning over and over that organizing is different in different places, and there are different approaches and different needs and different realities, and yet there's still, such a wide variety of things that are common, challenges about housing and wage theft and immigration and things like that. And so there, hope that you'll stay in touch with our farm worker partners and also stay in touch with us as we're trying to navigate between all of them and then do as much as we can in support of the individual groups. But last words from Migrant Justice?
I just want to thank everyone, especially the interpreters. I personally know all that work that is put on interpreting, but thank you for the space. We really looking forward to connect more with all of you. I hope you had the time to learn, and yeah, just email or let us know whatever you want to get involved or know more. We're open to answer any questions.
Yeah, we put the link in the chat for how to sign up to join our network. Thanks so much, everyone.
Right. Thank
Bye.
you. And we'll let Trinity close us out with some final announcements.
There was one more question in the chat. I don't know
sorry.
if somebody can answer it quickly, but it was, do you have any update on the farm labor stabilization program? So maybe somebody can answer it quick before Trinity closes us out.
Madeline, are you guys familiar with that?
This is what used to be called the Farm Workforce Modernization.
No. The Farm Labor Stabilization Program is a new granting program that is coming out of the USDA. uh, The best I can tell about it at this point is it really gives financial preference to worker-driven, socially responsible models of agriculture. It also acknowledges, you know, the ways in which farm workers have a voice in their own organizing and particularly more or less legal agreements with corporations or growers or that sort of thing. So it has the potential of benefiting and promoting farm worker advocacy and relationships and representation in different parts around the country. So it's still relatively new, so we're still learning about it at this point. But I know the Coalition of Immokalee Workers has already been contacted as sort of a part of that network. And similarly, some of the unions, farm worker unions, have been contacted about that because of, you know, when a grower signs a union agreement too, then there's more voice in what happens to the farm workers that are on those places. But that's about what we know at this time. So it hasn't, I don't know that it's filtered down to a lot of different places unless you have more information, Madeline. No, okay.
No, thank you.
Sure. Trinity.
Okay, so we're gonna close things up today. Just a couple of announcements. We just want to thank you all for coming again. If you have any more questions, feel free to contact us. We know that was a lot of information today, and you're probably going to be thinking through and processing it, so feel free to reach out to us. If we have any questions, you can leave them, and then we'll try to address them. We're going to include in our post-webinar mailing a link to the recording. Just in case you need to refresh on some things. But that should come out to you guys in about a week. And we're so grateful for Marita and Madeline from Migrant Justice joining us today. We're thankful for all of you for just putting effort to raise awareness about farm workers and immigration. We want to thank Rosie for handling the logistics of this event, and to Henry and Caesar for the translation. Please go to our website to sign up for our e-news and to see more of our resources on immigration. If you need anything, feel free to reach out. So thanks for coming, everyone.